Good evening, everyone. We are back. We skipped the December patient education seminar because of the holidays, and so I thought it would be appropriate for us, and I see someone pulling in, I thought it would be appropriate for us to start back in January and basically start at the beginning with stress. Stress is our body's way of sounding an alarm system. It's to tell us that we need to do something immediately or something is going to happen to us either physically, emotionally, or metabolically. Stress is an interactive process of a person and her or his environment. So that's where stress comes from. It's what we either have actually going on with us or we perceive what's going on with us. And we're going to pause for 1 second. Hi, come on in. Hello, come on in. Hi, come on in. That's right. And you can't escape quickly when you're in the back row, right? So the way we perceive stress and how we interact with stress is what creates an exacerbation of our stress response or allows some of those folks where you're like, wow, that was a really stressful situation and they handled that really well. So our perception of stress and how we handle stress is an important part of what we're going to be talking about this evening. The types of stress that we can actually incur as humans. Physical stress, of course. So physical stress can be caused by exertion. It can be caused by heat. It can be caused by exercise. It can be caused by lack of sleep or even something that causes damage to us. For example, if we're in a car accident, that is a physical stress put on our bodies. Stress can be caused by chemicals, and that could be chemicals that we're taking, whether they're pharmaceuticals, alcohol. Caffeine is considered a stressor because it does activate the adrenal system. So if you're having a great deal of stress, drinking a cup of coffee is probably not the best time to do that. Nicotine is also a potential stressor. Chemical pollutants, those are going to be chemical stressors. So the chlorine in our water is a chemical stressor. The chemicals that we eat in our food can be a chemical stressor. There can be mental stress, and mental stress can come from our environment. Our loved ones can be an area of stress for us. Children can be an area of stress for us. Our jobs can be an area of stress for us. Going back to college when you're 42 can be an area of mental stress for us. Emotional stress, and that's kind of anger, loss, frustration. Those can actually weigh on us and cause quite a bit of stress. Nutritional, if we don't have the right amount of food in the right quantity at the right time, we can actually stress our bodies on a cellular level. For example, we're out in the heat, we're very hot, we're not drinking appropriately, we become dehydrated, and it creates an electrolyte imbalance. We're working out very hard, but we're on a really strict diet and we're not feeding our bodies the nutrients that it needs to heal. That's also a form of nutritional stress. Trauma, we kind of talked about that with physical stress. So anytime we have even a surgery can create trauma stress. But if we have an accident, we break a bone, if something happens to our body physically, we can have a traumatic stress. Psychospiritual, fighting with our parents, figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up. Religious stress, things going on outside of our ability to control them, things that are happening in third world countries, things that are happening in other religious sectors can be an area of stress for us. Any type of stress can be considered an acute stress, something happening to us now, something that's going to happen now, we're going to get over it, and we're going to move on. Or it can be chronic stress. In that case, chronic stress is what actually can lead to diseases in the future. If something happens to us now, we're driving down the street, someone cuts us off, we slam on the brakes, our adrenaline goes up, our heart starts pounding, we might even start to sweat, we might even cry. But a few minutes later, we're like, okay, we didn't hit anybody, nobody died, everybody's in the car, we're all good, moving on. Chronic stress is going to be something that's happening to us over and over, day after day. So a job that we really don't love. Being a pharmacist for 18 years, although I loved my patients and I loved the knowledge of being a pharmacist, I'm not going to kid, I hated my job every day. I'm like, okay, here we go again. And it was actually that stress and that heaviness on my heart and that not feeling complete that led me to go back to chiropractic school and be talking to you fine folks today. So stress can also be a good thing. Stress can motivate us to do something else. Stress in the brain. So I wish we had the other slide up first, but that's okay. The stress response actually does begin in the brain. When someone is experiencing stress, regardless of the type of stress, the amygdala, which I will show you on the next slide, talks to the emotional processing center and the hypothalamus get together. They talk to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland tells our endocrine system to do something. So emergency, we need to move out of the way. The adrenal glands will pump out a little bit of adrenaline and we move. It's that long-term communication with that emergency signal always running in the backs of our brains, always releasing adrenaline and cortisol through our bodies that causes diseases long-term. Our body is not meant to be a Ferrari, foot on the gas, no stopping. That's not anybody's ideal way of living. It's too high of a stress load on the body. Our cells, our brains, our emotional state cannot stand that kind of complex emotional stress or chronic stress long term. The hypothalamus is the command center, so that's where we get all of the information coming in through our blood system, also through our eyes, smell, and touch. For example, it's not uncommon for us to touch something hot and remove our hands before we actually realize that it was hot. We perceive that it was hot, but is the perception as we're touching it or as we're moving away? It's actually as we're moving away. Same thing with an event happens in your life. A car pulls in front of you and you slam on the brakes. Before you can actually perceive that you need to slam on the brakes, your body is already responding to slam on the brakes. It's not uncommon for people who have been through stressful situations to say that it happened in slow motion. And that's because the brain actually perceives what needs to be done and starts the action long before the conscious brain actually feels the movement happening. It's an amazing process. The human body is an amazing organism, and its number one goal is to keep us alive. This is what we were talking about with the brain. The amygdala is in that red area in the middle of the brain. It is a deep, ancient part of our brain. So that's where we're getting in some information. The hypothalamus is located right here, right inside that whole amygdala area. Your cerebral cortex is where we actually have sensory and motor information. So the center of the brain will sense something needs to be done first before the cortex actually acts on it. So we are in motion to save ourselves from whatever might be causing that stress long before we even realize it. The problem comes is when the amygdala and the hypothalamus are constantly sending out those signals, it affects the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex stays in emergency mode all the time. The threshold where we act on that stress becomes shorter and shorter and shorter. So what ends up happening is that our stressful situations, whether they're as emotional or physical or psychological in depth as they were before, it doesn't matter. Every time something more stressful happens to us, our switches, our triggers become slower and slower and less. So we actually act upon those things faster than we would if we were able to kind of control our stressful situations and learn some techniques, feed our body good quality nutrition so that we're actually supporting our systems while we're going through whatever stressful situation it might be. And we've already talked about this. Sorry, I do have a tendency to not follow my slides, but the wiring is such that we actually act before we consciously realize that we're acting on that stress. So it is not uncommon for someone to again say that something happened in slow motion. They're like, well, I remember it exactly because it was in slow motion right in front of me. The chronic effects of stress on the body, we have physiological and emotional. So psychological effects of stress is that stress can actually cause depression. So it is that brain communication with all of our neurotransmitters that are becoming shorter and shorter fuses until finally the body does in fact become depressed. We don't always realize that we have like a storage bucket of all of the nutrients, hormones, and neurotransmitters in our body. When we're constantly poking holes in those buckets and we're not filling it up fast enough, that will deplete our body of those nutrients, our neurotransmitters, our hormones. And as we're becoming depleted on those, the body is becoming less and less effective. Personality changes. So you can see someone who's under a great deal of chronic stress for a long time, whether it's a physical sickness or an emotional upsetness in their home. They become more weepy. They may become angry. And you're like, I don't remember her acting like that. I don't remember him being so forceful, or I don't remember her behaving in that way. And that's because we can actually have personality changes when we're under chronic stress. It is a protective mechanism that the body tries to make us numb, and that's not really a very good way of living. So what we really want to do is be super healthy and be able to handle our stress more effectively. Stress can also impede the immune system. Anytime while I was a pharmacist, when we talked to our patients about very stressful situations, especially the big C, cancer, our number one goal was to help that patient work through all of the phases until they could get to a healing phase on the other side. Patients who are feeling a great deal of stress when they're under a great deal of sickness will actually become sicker. And I know you've seen that as well in the hospitals. Someone having a heart attack who is jovial and they're like, messed up, now I need to do better. They are much more likely to recover from that heart attack and actually survive longer than someone who is, I can't believe I had a heart attack. Nobody in my family's had a heart attack. This is so depressing. What have I done? How can I fix it? They drag their bodies down with the amount of stress that they're putting on themselves, and that drags their health down as well. Elevated blood pressure. Anytime we're under a great deal of stress, our blood pressure can go up because we are literally clamping down on our vessels because of our frustration, our anger, our worry. So the blood pressure can go up, and of course that can affect the cardiovascular system. Now the cardiovascular system is not just the heart. The cardiovascular system is the lungs and the kidneys. It's also part of the liver. So we can affect a lot of different organs when we're under a great deal of stress long term. Complete prevention of stress is not possible. We are humans. We live on planet Earth, and this is 2019. There's no way for us to shut off all the amounts of stress that come our way. Again, it's how we handle that stress leads to how we're going to deal with stress long term. The best form of prevention is a parenting model. So if we are able to teach our young children how to handle stress better, they're more likely to handle stress when they become adults. If we panic, they will panic. If we handle it in a calm, rational, logical way, we can teach our children how to handle stress that same way. I have to say, I didn't realize this, but my mom was really a cool cucumber. I can never remember my mom overreacting to things when we were kids. And we lived in a stressful situation. It was life. And my mom always handled it. I remember a specific time when my sister cut her finger with a butter knife. Mom grabbed it with a towel. In the car they went to the emergency room, back home, stitches. Life goes on. I do not remember my mom screaming and hollering and panicking. And I think that did, in fact, have a huge impact on how I handle stress today. Nutrition response testing. And a personal story with nutrition response testing is that, as you know, as I just said also, I was 42 years old when I went back to college to get my second doctorate's degree. I had been a pharmacist for 18 years, and I'm a big nerd. I love school. School's easy. I love it. I love the challenge. I figured this was going to be a no-brainer. I'm going to go back to chiropractic school. It's science, it's art, it's anatomy and physiology. Got this. Oh my goodness, I could not have been more wrong. My brain was 42 years old now, not 23 years old, and it was stressful. I was surprised. I thought that I was going to be able to go back to college, I was going to get a part-time job, all was going to be well. No, I was in class 8 hours a day, I was studying 8 hours a day, and I was stressed. Luckily, at the end of my first year of college, I met my nutrition response testing practitioner, the lady doctor who takes care of me, and I was amazed. We started working on my diet. So I was full of sugars, full of inflammatory things with chemicals and preservatives in my foods. We started changing that diet. She filled in the blanks with supplements. I actually was so much better. When other students were crying because we were having board examinations, I was cool as a cucumber, not because I was smarter than them, but because I was nourishing my body and giving my body what it needed, when it needed it, to go through the ups and downs of going to college. These board examinations are big deals. You don't pass a board test, you don't get your license. And I passed all of my boards on the first try. Very, very good accomplishment. But other people, students, were literally falling apart, crying in their cars. And I was like, wow, this stuff's amazing. So nutrition response testing is a huge part of staying healthy, not only with the supplements that we're taking, but the food choices that we're making. Makes a huge difference. Let food be your medicine. We've already kind of talked about that. Changing your diet does make a big deal. Essential fatty acids, your body loves them. What we go to are carbohydrates like chocolate and candy and potato chips, but what your body is actually looking for are essential fatty acids. Before a test, I would have an egg and half of an avocado. The essential fatty acids in that avocado would not only keep me full through my testing, but it also fed my brain the fatty acids that it needed to get me through that particular testing situation. It was a win-win. I was feeding my brain and my body, and it was producing the answers that I was looking for. And that's what happens in any stressful situation. You're at work, you have a big promotion coming up, you have to really nail this speech that you have to do. You're very stressed out, done. You've fed your body, you've supplemented with great supplements, and there you go. Families, drama, trauma, whatever's happening with the family, if you're feeding yourself simple carbohydrates, you're just going to spiral down with the rest of the family. You can be the voice of reason if you keep eating great foods and feeding your body. Exercise, and we're not talking about major muscle exercises. We're talking about getting outside, breathing in air, walking, yoga, Pilates, things that are going to be relaxing and also get that blood pumping through your system. It is essential to not become stagnant. Something as simple as a daily walk for 30 minutes can relieve your stress significantly for the rest of the day. Being open-minded. So we're not talking about beliefs as far as religious beliefs. We're talking about, I'm in the car with my husband, we're going to the north side of town. He wants to take Florida Avenue and I want to take Hardin Boulevard. It doesn't matter. Let's be flexible. If it ends up not working out well, that's okay too. We've gotten to our destination. So we can become very inflexible with our thoughts, our paths, how we want to get things done. But opening up our minds and being a little more flexible will actually relieve your stress. Read a book, listen to an audiobook on your phone, text someone. If you're in a situation where you are not in control, let the other person be in control. Unless, of course, it's an emergency and you have to take control. But we're talking about normal, everyday events. Folding the laundry, putting away dishes. We're talking about things that don't really matter in the long run. Breathe. Statistically, Americans hold their breath more than any other country in the world. I thought that was a fascinating statistic. We forget to breathe. When we're in a stressful situation, we clamp down on our breathing and we forget to breathe. By not breathing, you're not oxygenating your tissues. They're going into alert mode because they're like, oh my goodness, all this carbon dioxide, how am I supposed to get rid of it? Big breaths in the belly. When they said breathe and count to 10, they weren't kidding. That really does work. Big, filling breaths. Let it out. Take a couple of deep breaths. It will clear your mind. It will oxygenate your body, and it will reduce your stress. A good night's sleep. I know that it's kind of counterintuitive. Sometimes when we have our most stress, we can't fall asleep, and that's where nutrition response testing comes in and helps. A good night's sleep will help you wake up in the morning, and you might actually be clearer on an answer to your problem than tossing and turning and trying to hem and haw and think about it all night long. Let your body go to sleep. It is okay. You are going to wake up in the morning and you will have some answers. Do something relaxing. If you like to garden, your favorite television show, all of these things can be very relaxing. It can take your mind off of your stressful situation and allow you to heal, giving your brain those very vital few moments to think about an answer in your subconscious while your conscious is relaxing. Very important. And be kind to yourself. Most of our stress comes from our inability to be flexible with ourselves. We're looking for perfection. I know, I do too. And I also know that is not achievable. Everyone's idea of perfection is individual. What I think is perfect does not mean my husband thinks is perfect, does not mean my neighbors think are perfect, does not mean my patients think are perfect. We do the best we can, we help one another, and we stop looking for perfection. Be kind to yourself. If you've done a good job, pat yourself on the back. Give yourself credit for doing good things. Ask for help. You don't have to do everything yourself. What doesn't work, unfortunately, people try this often, hoping that it works, any type of illegal drug, even pharmaceuticals. We take benzodiazepines hoping that they help, and then they end up spiraling us down into a more stressful situation because now we're worried about addiction. It's not a good place to be. Alcohol, again, with illicit drugs and even pharmaceuticals, that's a tough one to use to help yourself relax. The side effects of alcohol is that it's a neurotoxin immediately. So you're using your brain or needing your brain to come up with solutions, and then you're using alcohol to relax yourself or to release your stress, and you're actually creating more problems. Any type of outward aggression, it's only a temporary measure to release some stress, but then you have to pick up the mess that you've created. So if you're throwing things or destroying things or hollering at people, you're creating a bigger mess, which could create a bigger amount of stress. Temper tantrums again, and smoking. Smoking is never good. Smoking is going to put a lot of toxins in your system right at the moment that it needs to have clean clarity. This was just a picture that I found on how stress affects the body. Stress affects the body, the mind, emotions, and behavior. And I found this quote that I really loved. If you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. So we can have things that have happened to us in the past. We cannot change them. We can prepare ourselves to not accept those things to happen to us in the future. But dwelling on something that has happened to you in the past will not be changed. It's already gone. You cannot change it. It will always be with you. It is part of who you are as the magnificent, amazing person that you are, for good or for bad. If you're thinking about the future and you're worried about it, you're not going to change it. You're only going to manifest what you're thinking about, and your anxiety is going to cause you to stumble over great choices that you could have made instead. If you're concentrating on the present, right now, in this room, you feel calm, you're surrounded by people who like you, you're in a calm, safe environment, there's no need to go anyplace out of this particular environment at this time. It brings quite a bit of peace to us when we stop worrying about things that we can't change. Now, I'm not saying don't prepare yourself for the future, but I am saying that if you're worried about the past and you think that worry about the past and anxiety for the future is going to change your perception of what's happening to you, that is not true. Meditation, exercises, making a plan and sticking to that plan is a much better choice for you to help your future than to be anxious or worried about it.